And we'll start out by asking Alice. And the plates. And I missed that last one.
When I started this channel back in 2019, it was to document my quest for the perfect 1911, so I actually started what I call the Great Affordable 1911 series. And if you want the definition of affordable, go back and look at the introduction to that series. At the conclusion of that series, or after the conclusion, I determined, just again, subjective opinion, that Dan Wesson was the premier production 1911 pistol. But with my experience with the DWX, I'm a little disappointed in Dan Wesson quality, so I haven't purchased any Dan Wessons in a while other than the DWX. Well, my friend Craig has loaned me a number of guns, and the other day he loaned me the Dan Wesson Commander Classic, or Classic Commander, whichever way you want to shoot it, and it actually has turned out to be a really nice gun. Stay tuned, we're going to talk about it and we're going to shoot it. All right, thanks for dropping in while we take a look at the Dan Wesson Classic Commander, or Commander Classic, however you want to say it. This is a Commander size gun, which means it is a full-size frame, takes full-size 1911 magazines, 45 caliber of course, and by Commander it means it's a 4¼ inch upper as opposed to your typical 5-inch. During our 1911 series, we actually had a couple of videos on the Dan Wesson PMC, Point Man Carry, which by the way is no longer in the catalog. Very, very similar gun, and makes a natural comparison. So we will be looking at some of the similarities, even some of the differences. The big difference between the Commander Classic and the Point Man Carry, the uppers are the same with a couple of minor differences. There's still a 4¼ inch upper, but the grip frame is shortened by 1 round, or just over a ½ inch, to make it theoretically a little bit more carryable, hence the Point Man Carry designation. But again, a lot of similarities between the two, so we'll get back to that here in just a minute. The Classic Commander, again Commander size, is also a bobtail, which means it's a little bit rounded in the grip, and that is theoretically to facilitate carry. Now, do I really want to carry this gun? Because some of that gets into weight. So let's take a real quick look at what this gun weighs versus a couple others. So, with an empty magazine, I'm not a big fan of weighing guns empty. We come out at 36½ ounces, which really by itself is pushing the limit for what I would normally consider a carry gun. But since it's full size, we'll also run 8 rounds of 230 grain ammunition. This just happens to be Hydra Shock, which is certainly a good defensive round. So, we will put 8 rounds plus a carry round, and that's not a Hydra Shock, obviously. 43.2 ounces, that's kind of pushing the limit. Let's look at the comparison with a couple others. The Point Man Carry, which we will get back to, takes 1 fewer round, and that is 41.9 ounces. Back to the full-size grip frame again. Look at the lightweight of what I have, and that is the Smith & Wesson Performance Center 1911, also Commander size, 36.3. So with 9 rounds of ammunition, the alloy frame or scandium frame Smith & Wesson is actually lighter than the steel frame, of course, Dan Wesson. And of course, we'll look at the Kimber KHX Pro. We've done a couple of videos on this. In fact, we've done videos on all of these. I'll try to link them throughout. Now, this one, granted, has an optic on it, 44.2 ounces, 1/4 inch shorter barrel, but everything else is pretty much the same, including a bobtail grip, although, of course, Kimber does have a plastic mainspring housing as opposed to the steel on the Classic. So let's go over some of the general features of the gun. Obviously, stainless steel slide, stainless steel frame. The flats are polished on this, hence I'm getting a lot of reflection from my overhead lights. The rounded portions are all bead blasted. So the rounded portion at the top, theoretically to cut down glare. A little bit up here in the front of the slide itself. The under part of the frame, all the way back to the very slight undercut of the trigger guard. The flats, though, again, are very highly polished, and the mainspring housing is polished. Notice that it is a smooth mainspring housing. According to Dan Wesson, that is so that it's going to have less friction, therefore less drag on your clothing when you're carrying it concealed. Obviously, with a bobtail, it's designed to be carried concealed. Very nicely polished on the the grip safety, but you can see here again on the frame part, the rounded parts, it is still a bead blasted type. The safety, which by the way is not ambidextrous, and the slide stop lever, again not ambidextrous, typical 1911, are highly polished. The trigger is kind of matte. Now the trigger just looks like plain stainless, not bead blasted or anything. Does have an over travel stop, and showing that the gun is unloaded while we're working here at the bench. You can take the magazine out. By the way, it does come with a Dan Wesson 8-round magazine. But again, the trigger on this, a little bit of take up, not much. Almost no up and down play, which again, I've always liked Dan Wessons for their fitted triggers. But just a little bit of take up. Very smooth, crisp, clear, which is what I always expect on a Dan Wesson. This is around a 3-pound trigger, just a hair less actually, and it does break cleanly, and no over travel, and tactile audible reset. And again, not big on reset. Again, if you're big on reset, watch a slow motion of Bill Wilson shooting in 1911. His finger comes all the way outside the trigger guard. He slaps the trigger, but he's got tremendous grip control, so he can shoot very accurately that way. Shooting the reset under stress, well, I won't even get into that. Let's see, the magazine release is checkered, and the front strap is also checkered, 25 lines per inch checkering, but again, nothing on the back strap, which is some of the comparison to the Point Man carry. Very similar on the front. The bead blasting, the polished flats, all that are very similar. 25 line per inch checkering on the front of the grip strap, but mainspring housing is also 25 lines per inch checkered, and a slightly rounded, not a bobtail obviously, but it's very slightly rounded, which by the way I wish they do on all officer size frames, again for concealment. A couple other differences though. The trigger on this is not a skeletonized trigger, although it does have an over travel stop. Everything else is pretty much the same. However, the grip safety, big difference between the two. Memory bump or speed bump, whatever you want to call it, on the Classic Commander, and also a little higher profile, covers that skeletonized hammer just a little bit more on the Classic Commander than it does on the Point Man carry. Also, sights are a little bit different on the two, even though they're essentially the same upper. The front sight on the Point Man carry is a fiber optic and very nicely contoured to the frame. Pretty much an exact fit to the slide itself, rather. And on the Classic Commander, it is a tritium night sight to go along with the Ameriglow tritium rear sight on it, but not quite as well fitted. There's just a little bit of gap on the edge here that you don't see on the Point Man. Rear sight's a little bit different too. We've got a lead style, plain old black, serrated black rear sight, which by the way I do like, gives me a real nice sight picture. On the Classic Commander, it is a ramp Novak style, and again it is tritium. Not adjustable either way other than drift adjustable, certainly not adjustable for height. And when we got into the range, I was shooting just a little bit low. Point of impact is a little bit below point of aim on this, so more of a combat type hold, and we'll get into the range part here in just a couple of minutes. Other than that, these guns are very much similar, but still slightly different. Oh, a couple other things. The barrel fit to bushing with a very slight crown or reverse crown on the PMC, much nicer fit to a barrel and bushing on the Point Man. Now that's an older gun, about 5 or 6 years old. The Classic Commander here is a newer gun, so maybe Dan Wesson's just changed things up a little bit. And there still is a slight reverse crown on the barrel, not much, but it's no longer fitted as well to the bushing. Speaking about fit and finish, we get to the back, and the extractor, which by the way you see is not stainless, is carbon steel. That is not quite perfectly fitted to the back of the slide, but yet the ejector, just a very slight lack of perfect fit. The slide to frame fit is good, and again there is no movement, because the typical Dan Wesson, they feel really, really nice when you work the slide on the frame. But again, the slide to frame fit is very good on this, and you can see it, obviously we've been running it wet. There's a little bit of oil still on there. Good wood grips, good texture to it, and even with a lack of texture on the back of the mainspring housing, I didn't really struggle when shooting this gun. So we're going to roll some range footage in here, and it ran just fine at 12 yards. I took it out to 25. I hit everything I wanted on the first shot, even 6-inch plate, even the 5-inch center on the red silhouette. Even getting that back, no big deal. And took it out to 50 yards. I did some warm up with this gun to make sure that it would hit what I wanted it to hit. Fingerprints on the slide. And during the warm up, I took one shot at the 6-inch plate at 50 yards and I got it. Do you think I could get that plate when I'm on camera? I couldn't do it, so that plate actually survived. But anyway, everything else was pretty good. I did miss the 16-inch once, but again, we'll roll all that footage in there and then we'll come back for a recap. Dan Wesson Classic Commander, bobtailed, 12 yards, and about 12 and a half right here. We'll ask Alice. And the plates. And the red prairie dog. Barrel. And let's just see what it'll do with Remington 230 grain ball over here at 25 yards. Start with the yellow raccoon on the right side. Black crow next to him. Head flipper on the black silhouette. Red woodchuck. And let's see, green standing prairie dog. Yellow 6-inch way over there on the left. And 2 shots left. See if I get the center out on the red silhouette. Can I get it back? There we go. Stayed open on the last shot. Remington 230 grain ball. Let's just see if I can do anything out here at 50 yards. Of course, I got to start with the gong. 16-inch, high right. Oh, come on, how can I miss that from here with this gun? There we go, 12-inch below it. 10-inch to the left of the 16. 8-inch below that. 6-inch to the left of that. Yeah, I got the gong again. 1 round left. Got to get that 6-inch. And missed it. All right, I got another mag. Got to try for that 6-inch. Got the gong again. Well, I got it for shot in warm-up. Oh well, try it again. Keep getting the gong. Means I'm shooting it a hair to the left. See if that 6-inch is going to be elusive this time. One more shot. And the 6-inch escaped unharmed. Dan Wesson, Classic Commander. All right, thanks for sticking with me while we look at another great Dan Wesson. And again, the quality just seems to be maybe just a tiny hair down from what it used to be. I think this is probably produced after supposedly CZ, which is the owner of Dan Wesson, took on Colt. I still think it was probably more of a Colt taking on the others, but it seems like a lot of Colt management was there, and it also seems like a little bit of the quality may have slipped just a little bit. Is Dan Wesson still the premier production 1911? I'd say yeah. Would I hesitate to buy another one? No, not at all. I still like Dan Wesson, although my experience with the DWX, you can see, was not all that favorable. But again, the Classic Commander, commander-sized gun, a little heavy for my carry, but certainly for those maybe younger or maybe a little more willing to carry something that's knocking on the door of 4 pounds. Okay, it does shoot really well. So Dan Wesson Classic Commander or Commander Classic 45, however you want to look at it, is still a really, really nice option. Thanks for stopping in.